Hey Planeswalkers, this is Eric from Bane Alley Magic bringing you another deck tech video. I'm here with Alex.
Nice to meet you.
And today we're going to be talking about Virtus the Veiled
and Gorm the Great.
So, here we go right into the deck, but before we start I just want to remind you, please like and subscribe, helps out a lot. Alright, so here we got Virtus the Veiled and Gorm the Great. So Virtus the Veiled is 2 generic and a black for a legendary Azra assassin. An interesting creature type I wish they kind of elaborated a little more on. So he's a 1/1 and he partners with Gorm the Great, which means when this creature enters the battlefield, target player may put Gorm the Great into their hand from their library and then shuffle. So obviously when they're your commanders that doesn't come into effect, but I did actually put these into my Thantis the Warweaver deck, which I think they do fabulous. And yeah, the ability to tutor for the other one is just great with any of the partner cards, so I strongly suggest considering the partner cards for your decks in general. So back to Virtus, he's a death touch creature, and when Virtus the Veiled deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life rounded up. On to Gorm the Great, he's 3 generic and a green for a giant warrior who partners with Virtus. He's a 2/7 vigilance, and when Gorm the Great attacks, he must be blocked if able, and Gorm must be blocked by 2 or more creatures if able. So I guess if able mean that he must be blocked, and he must be blocked by 2 or more creatures. So basically what that means is he kind of has to be blocked by their whole crew, right?
Only up to 2. If they have 3 creatures, they can choose one of the creatures not to block. The if able clause is mostly in relevance to tapped creatures or creatures who can't block for other reasons.
Okay, so yeah, why don't you tell us about your commanders?
So I'm a flavor first kind of player. I always look at the art and I always look at whatever story might be behind them before gameplay. I am not a spike. I like these guys because they make me think of 2 protagonists from like a 90s shonen anime. They also sort of have this BDSM bondage sadomasochism thing going on, which I think is funny because look at them, they're kind of ridiculous. Virtus as an Azra, which I believe is Wizards of the Coast version of a tiefling from Dungeons and Dragons, is a very devilish looking dude. Looks like he's going to a rave. His weapons are glowing. Gorm is like his bear buddy, his huge dude with his weapons are literally shields, which he tore them off of the scales of a dragon.
Right.
I like them. They're hardcore in a really cheesy way, which I appreciate.
And you know, I just want to say too, all the partners, if you look at them, they're all kind of in love, it seems, in some way. Like, you know, the brother and sister have that brotherly, sisterly love.
Yeah, the dragon and her knight, or dragon and her knight.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's the angel and the demon, which are like kind of literally lovers. And then there's like even like the lower ones, like the woman and her dog. You know, like she loves her dog, right? And so I don't know. It's not hard to think that maybe these guys have something going on. Maybe not. You know, but
maybe they're brothers from another mother. Maybe they're bound by some tradition. Who knows? You can make up your own story.
Or maybe they're partners in S&M. We don't know. Alright, so let's get on to the deck. So, we got what Alex is calling the early ramp package. We got Soul Ring. If you don't know what it does, turn
Stop
off.
playing Magic.
Yeah, alright, continuing. Lana War Elves, we got Monodork, 1/1 for 1 green, adds 1 green mana to your mana pool. So you want to ramp up early in this deck, obviously.
Yeah, if possible, get Virtus out turn 2 or turn 3. In my meta, a lot of stuff isn't happening before turn 4. So you can get Virtus out and usually have a target on turn 4 if you haven't ramped, but it's really great to ramp as early as possible.
Alright, so here we got our early ramp package, continuing with Rampant Growth, sorcery, 1 and a green, search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. By the way, I think any ramp that gets you a land onto the battlefield is the most useful ramp, normally. You know, though of course you do want to have plenty of creatures in the deck, so creature ramp is also important. So next we got Elves of Deep Shadow. It's a elf for 1/1. It's a 1/1 elf for 1 green, and you can tap it to add a black mana to your mana pool, and it deals 1 damage to you, which in Commander is not such a steep price to pay when you start with 40 life.
It's strictly inferior to Birds of Paradise, which I still need to put into this deck. I like the flavor of this, though, again, with the sort of bondage and sadomasochism. I don't mind that it deals damage to me.
Right?
It's a flavor.
You almost like it.
It's a flavor win.
You enjoy that it deals damage to you. Do it again. Give me black mana. Elvish Mystic. Another Lana War Elves. 1 green for a 1/1 elf. Adds 1 green to your mana pool. Fabulous early game ramp. Alright, Thought Vessel. 2 generic for an artifact. It says you have no maximum hand size, and it taps to add 1 mana to your mana pool. So fabulous in almost any commander deck. Just the ability to have no maximum hand size is really helpful when that other player busts out Jin Gitaxias. You know, it won't affect you if you got Thought Vessel. Alright, and more early ramp, Golgari Signet. 2 generic for an artifact. You pay 1 and tap it to add a black and a green to your mana pool.
The thing I like about that is if you have a hand full of black land, you can still get your green.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. Mana fixing. And there's actually also lands that kind of act like the signets too, so you can look out for those. All right,
now we're moving to the Evasion package.
Yeah, so this isn't the land package yet. We're on the Evasion package. So Rogue's Passage is a land that taps for colorless, or you can pay 4 and tap it. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. So we want to get Virtus through.
Yeah, where you're trying to make Virtus unblockable. Gorm does a lot of good by soaking up damage and occupying blockers. However, if we can just make Virtus unblockable, then we don't even need Gorm to be out.
And you know, this is an ode to the classic strategy in warfare, the hammer and the anvil.
There you go.
Right?
I like it.
Yeah, the Virtus is the hammer, and the anvil is Gorm. And the strategy there is that you have a creature or a group of creatures or a unit who can just take tons of damage, right? So they bog down the enemy by holding the line, right? They just stay there while the hammer comes around and outflanks the enemy and smashes them. So the hammer are the more strong warriors, you know, who can deal more damage, whereas the anvil are the people who can take more damage, you know. Whether they can also deal damage isn't as relevant, but it helps if they can also deal damage. All right, so continuing with the Evasion package, we got Skeleton Key, 1 generic for an equipment, and it says equipped creature has Skulk. It can't be blocked by creatures with greater power, and whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card, and it's equipped for 2.
Virtus as a 1/1 will generally be able to skulk by most things. Again, my meta tends to like larger creatures, and most of my token swarm opponents don't generally go off until turn 5 at the earliest.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's a good point too. Having a little commander is often a lot less threatening for the board, but it's a little commander that actually ends up doing lots of damage. Trailblazer's Boots is 2 generic for an equipment. Equipped creature has non-basic land walk, and it's equipped too. So even if someone's playing a monocolored deck, they're bound to have some non-basic lands. I mean, this must probably work every single game.
It's Commander. People like their own non-basic lands.
Oh yeah.
You may as well just say unblockable.
Prowler's Helm, 2 generic for an artifact equipment. Equip 2. Equipped creature can't be blocked except by walls.
Walls were not common in my meta until that dragon came out, which is wall tribal. But this is still a relevant card.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, every once in a while someone will have walls, but there's no way all 3 other players are gonna have walls out. Yeah. You know. All right, Suspicious Bookcase, 2 generic for an artifact creature wall. I love this card, by the way. It's such cool flavor. 0/4 for a defender creature that says pay 3 and tap it. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. Yep. Whisper Silk Cloak, 3 generic for an equipment. Equipped creature is unblockable and it has Shroud, so it can't be the target of spells or abilities, and it's equipped too. It's important to remember that once something has Shroud, you can't equip other equipment to it. So you have to kind of move the Shroudy equipment around in order to equip other equipment to your creature that has Shroud on it.
I consider this the ultimate piece of evasion because it is protection as well. It almost like Virtus becomes a ghost with this. It's just an ever-present thing on the field, and only a board wipe's going to get rid of them.
Yeah, that's pretty spooky on Virtus there. Alright, so more Evasion. Key to the City. I've never seen this one. 2 generic for an artifact. You tap it and discard a card. Up to 1 creature can't be blocked this turn. And whenever Key to the City becomes untapped, you may pay 2 mana. If you do, draw a card. Wow! So this is Evasion and drawing cards in one.
And I have some recursion in this deck, so I don't mind discarding a creature card because there's a chance I'll get it back later in the game anyway.
Very cool. Hot Soup. Oh, you got Hot Soup. This is great. 1 generic for equipment. Equipped creature can't be blocked. So there's your Evasion. And whenever equipped creature is dealt damage, destroy it. 3 generic mana. Oh, yeah.
I would consider this the weakest piece of the Evasion package, considering that the total equip and casting cost is similar to better pieces. However, it's cute. And the fact that Virtus is a 1/1 means that any damage dealt to him would kill him anyway.
Oh, good point.
So there's no real downside.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now we're moving into the Accoutrements for Gorm. These are not about making Virtus unblockable. These are about making Gorm a harding hitter, because he has to be blocked. So this is going to punish people who have to block him.
Nice. All right, so we got the Cauldron equipment. I believe you have all the Cauldron equipment in here. That's
yes,
awesome.
mostly because I wanted Sword to be in here.
Yeah. So the sword is very fabulous. Probably one of the more powerful ones. It's kind of got that godsend effect. So it's 4 generic for a legendary equipment, and equipped creature gets +5/+5, which is just huge already. Even though it's equipped 4, I mean, that's still a good deal. And whenever equipped creature deals damage to a creature, exile that creature. So
Gorm has to be blocked by 2 creatures at least, so even if they're huge and they survive the damage, they're gone. You're removing creatures from the game.
That's the 2 creatures gone. That's sick. Alright, we've got Druid's Call, 1 generic and a green. Whenever enchanted creature is dealt damage, its controller puts that many 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens into play.
Gorm has to be blocked. Damage is going to be dealt to him. He's a 3/7 naturally, so he will survive most things, but even if he doesn't survive, you're going to get a lot of squirrels out of this.
And if he does survive, you could get up to 6 squirrels, or if he got equipped with Sword or Cauldron, I mean, you could get up to 11 squirrels and have them survive. So that's, wow. Squirrels! Blah, blah, blah. There should be more squirrels in Commander in general, by
Mark
the way.
Rosewater has mentioned he wants more squirrels, but everyone else on the design team, I suppose, is pushing back against it because they think that squirrels are a non-cool, non-threatening animal type. They'd rather everything be, I don't know, monkey banderas from that Indian set. I have no idea what they prefer. I think squirrels are great.
Squirrels are great. I got a disease, and the only prescription is more squirrels. Infiltration Lens is 1 generic mana for equipment, and whenever equipped creature becomes blocked by a creature, you may draw 2 cards.
So that's
equip 1
per creature blocking it. Gorm has to be blocked by 2 creatures. If 2 creatures block it, you're drawing 4 cards for an investment of 2 mana. That's a great deal, especially in green and black.
Wow, yeah, this is another card I've never heard of before, but looks fabulous. I think I want to buy some of these. You get to draw 2 cards. Wow. All right, so Raving Dead. Oh, is this?
Yeah, we've moved into a package I refer to as the Virtus Squad. These are people who can replace Virtus if he gets removed too often, or if someone uses control magic to take it away. These cards have the same effect of combat damage equals having the opponent's life.
And so we got Raving Dead, 4 generic and a black for a 2/6 zombie with Death Touch. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose an opponent at random. Raving Dead attacks that player this combat if able, and whenever Raving Dead deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half his or her life rounded down. So it seems like the first ability's downside is kind of leveled out by the fact that he has Death Touch anyway. So
yes, and if you just equip him with any of the unblockable package, then you'll get through regardless, but you won't be able to get to pick your opponent, which does negatively affect you often.
This seems like a deck that might want to target one person over and over again rather than hitting the whole table, or do you try to spread the damage?
Well, I try to spread it out, because then if someone casts a large earthquake or fireball or something like that, someone might be down to 20 or 10 by turn 4, and they become a more desirable target than me.
It's definitely not the group hug deck. Alright, we got Quietus Spike, 3 generic for the classic equipment that gives creature Death Touch, and whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half of his or her life, rounded up, and it's equipped 3.
You can equip this to any mana dork, you can equip this to Gorm, you can equip this to any creature you end up with, like a squirrel, and it becomes a Virtus. The other good thing about it is if you equip it to Virtus, then the effect doubles.
Right, they stack.
If Virtus hits a character for 40, first you -1 the life, so it becomes 39. You half that for Virtus, and then you half that again for Quietus Spike.
So they lose 3/4 of their life total. If they were up to 40, that would be 10. They'd be down to 10 life at that point. Alright, so Scythe Claw is 5 generic for an equipment with Living Weapon. When this equipment enters the battlefield, put a 0/0 black germ creature token onto the battlefield, then attach this to it. The equipped creature gets +1/+1, and whenever an equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half his or her life, rounded up, and it's equipped 3.
This is essentially an overcosted Virtus. 5 generic mana for a 1/1 that is a Virtus. The benefit of it is that once this creature dies, it's essentially just you're left with the equipment that you can then move around to other characters.
Yeah, and it has the same equipment cost as a Quietus Spike. So, I mean, basically, once that germ dies, you're left with a Quietus Spike.
Now we have moved on into what I consider general synergy. In the most recent Commander product, there was a series of cards called the Commander Storm cards. That might be an informal term. The main conceit of them is that they're doubled and copied for each time you've cast your commander. The attraction with partner commanders is that each partner commander counts. So when you cast this spell, if you've cast both your commanders, you'll be copying it twice for a total of 3 resolutions, 3 copies of this spell. If you've cast each of your commanders twice, that's 5. You're getting 5 spells for 6 mana. It's a great deal. So let's read the card.
So we got Genesis Storm. This is a sorcery for 4 generic and 2 green. When you cast the spell, copy it for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. And it says, reveal the cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land permanent card. You may put that card onto the battlefield, then put all cards revealed this way that weren't put onto the battlefield on the bottom of your library in any order.
Imagine that you've cast Virtus, then Gorm, and then this. So then you'll get 3 permanents from your library for free, the mana cost of which can be huge. Your cheating mana cost.
Yeah, and looking at the permanents we've seen so far, that's pretty scary, getting any of those out. And we got another Storm card here, Skull Storm, which is a little more expensive, 7 generic and 2 black, so 9 mana cost for sorcery, and you can copy it for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone. And it says each opponent sacrifices a creature, and each opponent who can't loses half their life rounded up.
9 mana is huge. I hate seeing this in my opening hand. It's something of a Hail Mary card. The important thing here is that the opponent can lose half their life rounded up, essentially making it Virtus on a sorcery. And if they have the creatures to sacrifice, then that's great. It's removal. This is a very ineffective card against token decks. They're not going to be bothered by sacrificing 5 1/1s.
Yeah, I definitely say this is a card that I've taken in and out of decks, because lots of times it's a dead card. You know, lots of times they got a creature to sacrifice, and paying 9 mana to just make each opponent sacrifice 1 creature is not worth it. But yeah, definitely, if you got the partner synergy here, you can get this up to being copied up to like 5 times, and that can be huge, especially when you're already having their lives down. This can actually pretty much end the game, or at least get them down to 1, because it's always rounded up, so it's got to get them down to like 1. But I mean, from there, it's not too hard to finish them off.
It's absolutely a Goldilocks card if there ever was one, though.
Yeah. So this is Archfiend of Despair, 6 generic and 2 black for a 6/6 demon with flying, and it says your opponents can't gain life. And at the beginning of each end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life that player lost this turn.
So this card came out in the same set as Virtus and Gorm, and the synergy is obvious. I really think that whoever did this on the design team was really doing a good job. For one thing, whenever Virtus hits someone, they lose half their life. If you have the Archfiend of Despair out, or you play the Archfiend of Despair after combat, the effect is still going to go on the stack, so at the end of turn, they essentially lose the game. They're going to lose as much life as they just lost. And because they can't gain life, there's no way to then buffer themselves away from that impending loss. They have to remove the Archfiend of Despair. That's the only solution.
Yeah, because I know you have another piece that also makes them lose life equal to the amount of life that player lost this turn. You have another card that does that in this deck, but it doesn't say they can't gain life. So this is fabulous. This will end the game. They won't be able to recover from it.
It causes a cascading effect, and just having it out makes everything more impactful. Someone gets hit by a shock, that's 4 life instead of 2. If someone gets hit by a fireball, it could be the end of the game.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so... Alright. So next we have Fraying Omnipotence, 3 generic and 2 black. For a sorcery, it says each player loses half their life, then discards half the cards in their hand, then sacrifices half the creatures they control, and round up each time.
This card's a bit much. I include it because if you have this in the Archfiend of Depravity, it is essentially an instant win. They will lose half their life and then all their life at the end of the turn. This happens to you as well, which I think fits the theme of self-harm, because you're committing to this as well. You really want to have a few creatures out so you don't end up sacrificing Gorm and Virtus yourself.
Yeah. And so this is a Virtus effect, but it also affects you. And so would you say you wouldn't play this unless you had like Archfiend out, or would you still probably play this as long as you had more life, I'm assuming?
This can be something of a mutually assured self-destruction card. I will play this if I think I'm going to lose just to go out with a bang. I will play this to put someone into a more disadvantageous position than myself. If an opponent is playing something like a Voltron deck and they maybe only have one or two creatures, one being their Voltron, the other being their utility, they're going to have to pick something which could put them on the back foot for the rest of the game.
Definitely. Right. Next we got Wound Reflection, very similar to Archfiend of Despair. It's a 5 generic and a black for an enchantment, and it says at the end of each turn, each opponent loses life equal to the life he or she lost this turn.
This simply being out changes the game. All damage feels like it's doubled for your opponents, and it can lead to some very quick resolutions. Unfortunately, it can also mean everyone will gang up on you because you're the one creating the effects.
Yeah, and with this deck, that's not a big surprise. So, adding in a glacial chasm might not be a bad idea. I know there's some other additions you want to make to this deck.
So now we're getting into the rest of the deck is just generic filler, good stuff. I could treat any card from this point on as interchangeable, but they all have a purpose. Ewit, very common card, every green deck runs this. You can get back your Wound Reflection if someone naturalizes it, you can get back a Quietus Spike, you can even just get back a land if you need it.
Yeah, this card kind of goes in almost any deck. So if you don't know it, it's 1 generic and 2 green for a 2/1 human shaman. When Eternal Witness enters the battlefield, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand. That's, again, as Alex said, any card, even a land. Next we have a Noble Quarry, or that's how you say it, right? Quarry? Quarry.
That might be a turbine kind of thing.
So, 2 generic and a green for an enchantment creature, Unicorn. So this is from the Theros block where they had enchantment creatures. It's a 1/1 and it's got Bestow 6. So Bestow means if you cast this card for its Bestow cost, it's an aura spell with enchant creature, and it becomes a creature again if it's not attached to a creature. So if the creature it's attached to dies, then it just enters the battlefield as the 1/1 creature that it's supposed to be. So it says all creatures able to block Noble Quarry or enchanted creature do so. An enchanted creature gets +1/+1.
This acts mostly as a replacement for Gorm. When this attacks, all creatures are going to have to block it, so it's not going to survive, but it can allow Virtus to get in. Or, interestingly enough, if you cast it for its Bestow cost, you can put it onto a Death Touch creature, of which I have a few, and then any creature that blocks it will die. You can only distribute as much power as you have, so if you put this onto another 1/1, you're only going to have 2 power, which means you can only distribute 1 power to 2 creatures, thus killing 2 creatures. But it's still good. In a way, it's almost an indirect form of removal.
Yeah, and I want to say, too, that the creatures with this ability, like Gorm, that have the ability where they have to be blocked, are very underrated, I think, in the game. They are ways to kind of guarantee that your other creatures are going to get through. They even printed one recently in the new Guilds of Ravnica set. I forget what it's called, but it's 1 generic, a green, and a black for a 1/1 Death Touch creature that says all creatures who can block it must block it. So, very powerful ability.
I should actually put that into this deck.
Right. Alright, so next we got Vampire Nighthawk, 1 generic and 2 black for a Vampire Shaman. It's a 2/3 with flying, Death Touch, and lifelink.
It's your boy, Vampire Nighthawk. He is a classic card. He is been popular in Standard, and he has been almost ever present in Commander as long as I've played this game. Flying, Death Touch, and lifelink on a 2/3 for 3 mana is just a great deal. He's a very intimidating blocker because no one wants to use their best dragon to kill him, He can be an opportunistic attacker. Gaining 2 life isn't something to sneeze at, I think. Life gain is only relevant in the most competitive levels of Magic. I think in Commander it's still fine. It helps you outrace a lot of clocks, and it makes you a less desirable target towards other combat decks.
Yeah, this is certainly a card I've never regretted drawing, you know, like late game, early game. I mean, even having a death touch blocker late game or being able to gain a little bit of life game late game is pretty relevant. So, you know, just a very versatile card. Not like, you know, combo specific, but just like Eternal Witness, I mean, I see it in almost every black deck out there. You know, you throw in Vampire Nighthawk, it's just a great 3-drop creature. Custody Lich is 3 generic and 2 black for a 4/2 zombie cleric. When Custody Lich enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And whenever you become the monarch, target player sacrifices a creature. So if you don't know what the monarch means, that means at the beginning of your end step, you get to draw an extra card, and someone else can become the monarch if they deal you combat damage. And if the monarch, you know, if there isn't a creature that puts the monarch mechanic into the game, then the monarch isn't a part of the game. But as soon as a creature puts the monarch into the game, it's pretty much there for the rest of the game, unless you somehow kill the person who is the monarch by draining their life total to 0.
Then the monarch passes to the next person in the row, so it'll go from left to right.
Oh, does it?
Yes.
Okay. So it never goes away.
No. The thing I like about Custodial Lich is I have so much unblockability in this deck that if someone takes the monarchy away from you, you can always just swing back and get it back, forcing them to sacrifice a creature, and then you'll draw another card at the end of turn, and chances are you've also have their life in doing so.
Yeah, all that evasion is fabulous with the monarch. Okay, next we got Ink Eyes, Servant of Oni, which is a rat ninja, 5/4 legendary for 4 generic and 2 black mana, and she has ninjutsu 5. So if you pay 3 generic and 2 black, you may return an unblocked attacker you control to your hand. Then put this card onto the battlefield from your hand, tapped and attacking. And she says, whenever Ink Eyes, Servant of Oni deals combat damage to a player, you may put target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, and she even has Regenerate for 2.
So this is great. Again, there's a lot of unblockability in this deck. If you decide that getting in with Virtus isn't as desirable as stealing a creature from their graveyard, you can swap Virtus out for her from your hand, and then get that creature. There's untold combo potential with stealing creatures from other players, and sometimes it's just good to get that value.
Alright, so next we got Acidic Slime, which is 3 generic and 2 green for a 2/2 Death Touch, and when Acidic Slime enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land.
It's just value. That's all it is. Every green deck has one of these.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Taunting Elf is a 0/1 elf for 1 green, and it says all creatures able to block Taunting Elf do so.
Similar to the Noble Quarry, this is a card I could switch out for another piece of removal or another piece of ramp, or even the newer version of this that has Death Touch, which was mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. All the cards from this point on are mostly interchangeable. This is just how I chose to fill out the deck in response to my meta.
I'm going to go ahead and look for that card real quick. Why don't you read this next card, Alex?
Cultivate. Sorcery, 2 generic, 1 green. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, and put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, then you shuffle your library. Cultivate and Harmonize are very common in green packages. They essentially skip you from turn 3 to turn 4 and then guarantee you a land drop in turn 5. It is just great.
Yeah, it goes in any green deck, just like Kodama's Reach, the same thing.
There it is.
Same exact card, same mana cost. Alright, so next we got Sword of the Animist, which is a legendary equipment. It's 2 generic to cast. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, something that people often forget. The more important thing is, whenever equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card and put it on the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library, and it has equipped 2.
Both Virtus and Gorm are relatively low drops, a 3 and a 4. Chances are you're going to have a creature to equip this to, and you're going to make some favorable attacks. And just to keep the constant land generation is just a great effect.
Yeah. Sign in Blood is 2 black for a sorcery. Target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life.
It keeps things in theme with the self-harm. I like black's theme of paying life for card draw. Abundance. It's an enchantment. It costs 4 mana, 2 generic, 2 green. Whenever you would draw a card, you may instead choose a land or non-land, and then you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card of the chosen type. Put that card into your hand and put all others revealed on the bottom of your library. This is card selection, and it's amazing. If you need a land, you get to pick land, and then you get the first land that comes out of your library. If you don't need a land and you're done, you can just pick non-land, and then from every draw after that is basically a live card.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this go in tons of decks, and I hate it. I hate that I don't own one. God, I bet you love having that card, don't you?
Yep.
So Mind's Eye is 5 generic for an artifact. Whenever an opponent draws a card, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card.
This is brainless filler. It's a great card. It can go in any deck. Black and green, I need a little bit more card draw, and so I figured I would just round it out with my copy of Mind's Eye. Night's Whisper, 1 generic, 1 black for a sorcery. Draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. It's the exact same thing as Sign in Blood, except the mana cost is not as heavy. I would say it's a strictly better version of Sign in Blood.
Alright, next we got Erebus, the Binding Blade. 7 generic for a legendary equipment. It has equip 1. An equipped creature gets +1/+0. And when equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, unattached... is it Erebus or it's Elbrus maybe?
I think it's Elbrus.
Elbrus, excuse me. You unattach Elbrus and then transform it.
So this is definitely a pet card. I like to include it because of the amount of unblockability in this deck, and it is so satisfying to hit, flip, and get the big guy, the final boss from a Final Fantasy game.
Withengar Unbound, a 13/13 legendary demon with flying, intimidate, and trample. So that means it can't be blocked except for by other black creatures or by artifact creatures. And whenever a player loses the game, put 13 +1/+1 counters on Withengar Unbound. And I bet that actually happens a lot with this deck.
Yep, this deck is about making the game end quickly for someone. If you have Withengar Unbound out, he goes from a 13 to a 26. It is just an escalating threat that needs to be dealt with. I think he looks like a final boss from a Final Fantasy game, which is hilarious.
Yeah. And I finally found the card on Scryfall here. So it's Accoutrements Assassin. It's a 1 generic and a black and a green for a 1/1 elf assassin with death touch. All creatures able to block Accoutrements Assassin do so. So yeah, there's plenty of cards like this in all the sets, so don't underestimate them. They do good things.
Fire Shrieker is a pretty generic card for this deck. It's artifact equipment, 3 mana, equip 2. Equipped creature has double strike. It's tempting to give Virtus double strike just because you'll have their life and then have their life again after that. This card could be switched out for anything.
Yeah, and it's important that everyone remember any creature that has an ability that triggers when it deals combat damage to a player. If you give that creature double strike, that ability will trigger twice.
Next, we're going to have the other 2 pieces of Cauldron. Sword of Cauldron, 4 generic mana, legendary artifact equipment. Equipment named Sword of Cauldron, Shield of Cauldron, and Helm of Cauldron are indestructible. And then this equipment also gives the equipped creature indestructible. Cauldron is something of a gimmick. We'll see what that does in a second. I've included them here just because I wanted the sword. And here we have the final piece, the revelation, Helm of Cauldron. 3 generic mana, legendary artifact equipment, equip 2. Equipped creature has first strike, trample, and haste. Mostly irrelevant for this deck, but for 1 mana, if you control equipment named Helm of Cauldron, Sword of Cauldron, and Shield of Cauldron, you may put a 4/4 colorless avatar legend creature token named Cauldron into play and attach these equipment to it. If by some miracle you end up with all 3 pieces of Cauldron, you can assemble what will end up being a 9/9 indestructible creature with first strike, trample, and haste. It's nothing to sneeze at. It won't win you the game on its own. It's definitely not going to make you lose the game either. It's just funny to see this happen. I've only seen Cauldron come together maybe 4 or 5 times in my life, but when it does, it's always a cause for much celebration and mirth.
Yeah, it doesn't happen every game, but when it does, you got a creature that is super hard to deal with. And if you're playing a deck that has ways to tutor up equipment, I suggest trying it out just for the fun of the game. I also made my own Cauldron token, which I can't find right now. But, you know, they haven't really made a paper Cauldron token, so it's also a lot of fun to make your own Cauldron token, maybe Photoshop all the equipment onto some creature, and, you know, make your own take.
Mask of Memory. 2 generic mana for an artifact equipment. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw 2 cards. If you do, discard a card. For 3 mana and the amount of unblockability in this deck, we're going to connect a couple times with this, and it's going to draw us some great cards. We don't care about discarding because we do have some recursion, so we can always get that discarded card back. Sounds good. Luxodon Warhammer, 3 generic mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has +3/+0 and is trample and lifelink for equip 3. Generic good stuff. If we attach this to Gorm, then we're gaining life and we're getting some damage over. If we attach it to an unblockable Virtus, then we're just gaining some life. It's nothing to sneeze at. Crawl Space. 3 generic mana for an artifact. No more than 2 creatures can attack you each combat. This is mostly a meta response to the fact that there are some token decks in my meta that run a lot of 1,000,000/1/1s. 1,000,000/1/1s don't matter if only 2 of them can attack you.
Absolutely, very important card. Also, I found the Cauldron token. I just want to show it to everyone. So if you get the Helm of Cauldron, Shield of Cauldron, Soldier of Cauldron, you make a token. So I made this one. It's actually from a Dragon Ball Z video game. Some Dragon Ball Z character powering up, and I just photoshopped the equipment on top of it.
That's hilarious. It's very funny.
It's very fun to pull out this token. Alright, so...
Swiftfoot Boots, 2 generic mana for an artifact equipment. Equip 1. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste. Either of these can be good if you're casting Virtus late into the game. Otherwise, I would just consider this generic good stuff.
Next we got Hammer of
Nazan.
4 generic for a legendary equipment. Whenever Hammer of Nazan or another equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach that equipment to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has indestructible, and this is equipped 4.
Having an indestructible Gorm that's a little stronger is a great thing because it basically becomes repeatable removal, and then it makes all of your equipment after that equipped for free, which can really speed up the game and save you a turn.
Basilisk Collar is 1 generic for an equipment. Equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink, and it's equipped 2.
I would consider this to be a more relevant form of Luxodon Warhammer just because of the Death Touch. If we attach this to the Gorm, then all the creatures Gorm are blocking are probably going to die. And you're also going to gain a little bit of life from the exchange.
Alright, this one is Darksteel Plate, 3 generic for an equipment that has equipped 2. Darksteel Plate is indestructible, and the equipped creature is also indestructible. Darksteel Plate!
Purely good stuff. I like that I have a Japanese version of this.
Hero's Blade, 2 generic for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+2, and whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach Hero's Blade to it, and it's normally equipped 4, but apparently we just equip it for free.
I will admit that this is a pet card. For some reason I fell in love with this the moment it came out, and I like playing combat commanders. So the fact that this is just an instant boost for any combat commander comes out is fun to me.
Alright, Bonus Hunger, 2 generic for a black, 2 generic and a black for an instant, and it has Ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. So you either get the City's Blessing when you cast something with Ascend, or when you have something with Ascend on the battlefield, and you eventually get 10 permanents. Then Bonus Hunger says each opponent sacrifices a creature. If you have the City's Blessing, instead each opponent sacrifices half the creatures he or she controls, rounded up.
I wouldn't bother casting this card unless you have 10 or more permanents, because it only affects your opponents. It doesn't affect you. That almost makes it a one-sided board wipe. And again, this is a meta response to the fact that I have a token deck in my meta, which I really just want to force them to sacrifice half their creatures.
Yeah, especially in a deck where you need to get through with that combat damage.
Yes.
Decree of Pain is 6 generic and 2 black for a sorcery. It says destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. Draw a card for each creature destroyed this way. Or you can cycle it for 3 generic and 2 black, which means you discard this card and then draw a card for 3 generic and 2 black. And when you cycle Decree of Pain, all creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn.
When I'm playing against that token deck, either form of this is great. Either the -2 is going to wipe out their entire army of 51 ones, or I'm going to end up drawing 50 cards.
Awesome. Alright, Torment of Hailfire. This is a card that I commonly end games with. X and black. So you would think this is XX black. No, it's just X black for a sorcery. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. So if you paid 6 black into this, for example, 6 times they'd have to choose either discard a card, sack a non-land permanent, or lose 3 life. And if they don't have any more cards or non-land permanents, they just lose that much life.
It's brutal, it causes headaches. No one will be happy about any of the choices they have to make because of this.
Yeah. Definitely better late game, but I've seen it early game too, and just still makes everyone mad.
Yep.
Right, Painful Quandary is 3 generic and a black for an enchantment. It says whenever an opponent casts a spell, any spell, that player loses 5 life unless he or she discards a card.
This is a pure troll card on my part. I think it fits with the themes of pain, self-harm, BDSM, but you're doing it to your opponents. This can really slow down the game. It stops people from storming off. It demands removal. It will make you the enemy. So know that when you play this, you might be causing 3 opponents to ally against you, but it can buy you some time or just outright win you the game because they won't be able to cast the 3 spells they need to win.
Vraska the Unseen is our 1 planeswalker in the deck. 3 generic, a black and a green for Vraska that enters with 5 loyalty counters. And you can +1 Vraska to until your next turn. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to Vraska the Unseen, destroy that creature. You can -3 to destroy target non-land permanent, literally pretty much anything that's not a land. And if you ultimate her for -7, you put 3 1/1 black assassin creature tokens onto the battlefield that have, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. So I'm sure that's great with Evasion.
Yes, and Vraska is on point thematically. The assassins she makes are like super little vertices, and you've got plenty of unblockability to make them get through. I've never managed to ultimate her though. I usually +1 her a couple times, and then we'll spend the rest of the game using her -3 ability to remove other people's combo pieces, so they just don't win themselves.
Tainted Remedy is 2 generic and a black for an enchantment. If an opponent would gain life, instead that player loses that much life. I read that backwards, but that's what it means.
So life gain can be a problem for us, even though we're having their life each time we connect with Virtus. If they can keep gaining life, they can basically stay above water. This is just a fun card that really backs everyone into a corner.
Yeah, it's bad if someone steals it though.
Yes.
Which is rare, but I've had that happen to me, man, that sucked. So Promise of Power is 2 generic and 3 black for a sorcery. Choose one. You draw 5 cards and you lose 5 life, or put an XX black demon creature token with flying on the battlefield, where X is the number of cards in your hand as the token enters the battlefield. And you can also entwine this by paying an extra 4, so you can choose both modes if you pay the entwine cost.
So if you do that, you're going to end up with a 5/5 demon and 5 cards. That's how it plays out. I think this is a great card. It's on theme. I'm normally almost going to cast it just for the 5 mana, just to get those 5 cards for 5 life and refill up my hand. But if the game's gone late, having a flying demon is not it's not bad for you.
Yeah, and it can be a huge demon. All right, Dead Bridge Chant is 4 generic, a black and a green for an enchantment, and when Dead Bridge Chant enters the battlefield, put the top 10 cards of your library into your graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose a card at random from your graveyard. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield, otherwise you get to put it into your hand.
I like every creature in this deck. I'd be happy to see any of them come back, but the fact that this can return any other card as well is great, because if you get back a sorcery, or if you get back even just a land card, it goes to your hand and you can keep playing.
Yeah, and even if it's not exactly the card you want, I mean, you're still basically just drawing a random card from your graveyard. It's card advantage right there. Exsanguinate is another way I commonly end games. X and black for sorcery. Each opponent loses X life, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way.
It's powerful, it's thematic. I've seen games just end when this gets cast, or it can, again, buffer you with enough life to make you a less desirable target than an opponent.
I actually won a game the other night because I had Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond out, and then I cast Exsanguinate for just 1 X, but where X was 1, and that was enough to have the combo go infinite.
Degenerate. And from this point on, our lands, honestly, I don't have the best land package for this deck. I don't try to. I'm not a spiky player, and this is mostly just a mana package.
Yeah, so as I understand, we got 38 lands total, including the Rogue's Passage, and so we got 12 non-basics, 13 forests, and 13 swamps. So for the non-basics, you already saw Rogue's Passage. Next we got the Temple of Malady, adds a black or green to your mana pool, and you get to scry 1. So you look at the top card of your library, and you may put that card on the bottom of your library. So great budget dual land for sure. Tainted Wood is, you can add 1 generic to your mana pool, or you can add a black or green to your mana pool, but you can only activate this ability if you control a swamp. Golgari Rot Farm is a bounce land, so this enters tapped, and when this enters the battlefield, you return a land you control to its owner's hand. The advantage is it adds both a black and a green to your hand. Again, the important thing to remember with bounce lands is if they're in your opening hand and you've only got that and 1 other land, you don't want to keep that opening hand. You want to make sure that you've cast at least 1 spell before you play a bounce land, or else you're going to have to discard a card. And remember that the card that you return to your hand should be a land that re-enters the battlefield untapped. Foul Orchard enters tapped, adds a black or green to your mana pool. Obviously, we're going a little budget here.
This is proof that I'm not a spiky player.
Llanowar Wastes adds a colorless, or you can tap it for a black or a green, and it deals 1 damage to you.
It enters untapped. That 1 damage is never going to decide the game for you. Go ahead and play these cards.
Yeah. Bajuka Bog goes in literally any black deck. If you don't have Bajuka Bog in your black deck, get it now because it's a really cheap card. Only quarters for land that enters tapped, but when it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard, and it can tap to add a black mana to your mana pool.
Degenerate graveyard synergies exist in almost every color. I've seen mono red decks that will play all their sorceries from their graveyard. I've seen mono blue decks that will get all their sorceries back from their graveyard. So this is great. Yeah. This is great against anyone.
And even if you Bajuka Bog someone's graveyard who doesn't have graveyard synergy, often someone else is going to use their graveyard, so it still is effective. Hissing Quagmire is a creature land, so it enters tapped, it adds a black or a green to your mana pool, or you can pay 1, a black and a green, and Hissing Quagmire becomes a 2/2 black and green elemental creature with Death Touch until the end of the turn. It's still a land.
Having this untapped with 3 mana available is just having a Death Touch blocker. It's a constant reminder that you're not to be attacked flippantly.
Yeah, so make sure you announce the creature lands every time you play them. So many players don't announce their cards, but when it's a land that's a creature, especially with Death Touch, you got to let the other players know. At least when you play it. Yeah. You don't have to tell them the whole game. You don't have to tell them every time they attack you, but when you play this card, let everybody know I got a land that can turn into a 2/2 Death Touch creature, because, if not, they will attack in unknowingly. Jungle Hollow enters tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life, adds a black or green to your mana pool, popper staple. Golgari Guildgate enters tapped, adds a black or green to your mana pool. So anyway, I guess the main point here, even though these aren't all the best, lands, the point is you want to have, even if you're running on a budget, you still want to have at least 12 dual-colored lands when you're playing a 2-color deck.
And it's foil, so
yeah,
there you go. It's foil.
High Market is an awesome card. It taps to add 1 generic mana to your mana pool, or you can tap it and sacrifice a creature and gain 1 life.
This exists to stop the control player from stealing Virtus. You don't want to get hit with your own Virtus. You'd rather sack it and cast it for 5 again.
Yeah, and just having a sack outlet is useful in so many situations. Like you said, someone's trying to gain control of your creature, someone's trying to exile your creature, someone's trying to enchant your creature. You can sack it. Command Tower adds 1 mana to your mana pool of any color in your commander's color identity. If you're not playing a mono-colored deck, you need Command Tower.
Ubiquitous. And now we're hitting our basic land package. package.
All right, and like we said, we got 13 swamps and 13 forests, and that makes 38 lands.
If you have the money to get better lands, please do so.
Right on. Okay, well that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. This is Alex, and I'm Eric, signing off. Until next time, take care, take it easy.
Thanks, guys.